From the University of California, Irvine, this is UCI Minds Spotlight on Care, the podcast where we share stories, experiences, tips, and advice on caring for loved ones affected by Alzheimer's and other dementias. Welcome, everyone, to today's Spotlight on Care episode. We're excited to have Dee Ransom here. Dee has her own personal experiences. We really talk about them as adjustments that she made, that she had to learn to make in terms of being the best caregiver she possibly could for her husband. So to begin with, we'll start off with a little story of our own about what it's like making those kinds of adjustments.
I think since you're going to be talking about being a caregiver to your husband, my situation was a little different in that it was my mom. But I think I can say my difficult adjustment was acting. Really and truly, I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her parent. And that, I think, was the most difficult thing for me. She was my go-to. We were best friends. I went to her for advice on everything as a daughter to a mother. And here I was trying to act like a daughter, but really I was making decisions about her as if I were her parent. And I found that difficult.
Yeah, adjustments. I feel like I've been making adjustments my whole life. But in this case, they were pretty significant. And the biggest one for me was patience. I had never been a very patient person in my life and had a bit of a temper, being an Irishman, of course. But I had to learn how to adapt and how to be patient and how to, repeat answers over and over again and other types of patience that were required. I'll never forget a couple of close friends saying to me soon after Patty was diagnosed and I was becoming the primary caregiver, they said, "Oh, you've changed so much, Steve." And I go, "No, I didn't. I haven't changed. I'm still Steve." And they said, "No, you're much more patient than you ever have been." So it's for the best sometimes. Anyway, here's Dee, and we'll start off with a little background on her and have her tell us a little bit about her background personally and how she became a caregiver for her husband.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I've been married to John for over 50 years now, and we met at UC Davis. And
Whoa. We only accept anteaters here.
Oh, well, I'm a partner, right? A partner campus, right? Anyway, we met at UC Davis, and after we were married, we both went on to have, successful careers and what have you. And John's career in federal law enforcement actually, I wouldn't say forced him to be healthy and active and everything, but, it required it. And so he was a very healthy person for a long time. And he had run Marine Corps marathons, et cetera, and things like that. But nevertheless, he struggled with clinical depression for years and years and years and wound up with ECT in 1984.
What's ECT?
Good question. It's electric shock therapy for the brain to relieve major clinical depression for one, okay? And so it helped for about 17 years. We moved around all over the United States with his career. We finally were able to settle in Virginia and later here in Southern California with our two boys and raise them. But I had to retire early myself in 2003, primarily because John was developing health problems. Specifically, he was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. And he was calling me at work a lot, and he had been retired by then. And it was getting concerning, so I did retire early. His formal diagnosis with Alzheimer's, though, came in 2017 through his neurologist. But he was having a conversation with a psychologist, actually, at the time, who could not follow his conversation, and John could not follow hers. And so she goes, there's help for this? And she did suggest that John see his neurologist, who had been treating him for some other things like neuropathy and a few other things. She did see him. She did diagnose him as having Alzheimer's. That was in 2017. So that's where we are in terms of then. Now it's quite different.
One of the things that you mentioned that caught our thinking was you used the word that you had to become an advocate, not just a caregiver. And I think that's really true, but we're really interested to hear how you would talk about it.
We all do loving things for our husbands and our wives, and we wouldn't consider them
Or our
advocacy.
parents.
And our parents, anyone that that we care about, period. But I actually had to become more of an advocate seriously. In other words, like, I was happy to do this for my best friend, by the way, but at the time I didn't even consider it an advocacy, but I had to arrange all of a sudden all the doctor's appointments. I had to attend all the doctor's appointments. I had to drive John everywhere because John's neurologist reported his diagnosis to the DMV. And that was really hard for John. And of course, it became hard for me. And I don't mean the driving part. I'll tell you about that. It was really hard for John because he's basically a car guy. And losing that independence was really hard. For me as an advocate, though, it meant that I had to attend everywhere with him, and I always did remind John that, honestly, it did not bother me to do that. I mean, I was happy to be able to assist him. What was tricky as an advocate, though, was listening for 4 years to the fact that, well, I've never had any accidents and I've never had, a ticket or anything like that. So I had to hear that in cyclical form. So that was hard. But other things that I remember having to accompany him to every event that typically he as a guy would go to by himself or with his dear friends. And that was mostly for what? It was mostly for safety. John came to a place where he could not be left alone at all. I'm not kidding. Just to say, for example, to the men's room in the theater, he could get lost. And the dilemma was, the reason I needed to go with him to every event was that his two very best friends really didn't want to admit or understand that John had Alzheimer's, and his body looked really still good and everything, and so, well, he can go in the bathroom by himself, right? No. Even walking around the block in the neighborhood. So those were types of things that at the beginning I had to do that, still being his advocate, and it's something we have to pay attention to for safety.
You mentioned a couple of friends that he had that were either slow to accepting his disease or never accepting his disease. How difficult was that for you if they were such good friends?
That was really hard at first, because I have been educating all of our family and acquaintances and dear friends all along, because very soon after the diagnosis, resourceful people from, local Alzheimer's and national Alzheimer's organizations told us, don't hold this in, educate people. So we did. I had people over and we talked about it and everything, and John did too, by the way. But when his two best friends did not want to accept it or believe it or this or that, that was really hard. It still is. It still is, because they still don't want to accept that, even though they see the progression now.
I don't think people know what to say or
Exactly.
do. They feel like whatever they say could be the wrong thing.
Yes.
They just don't know.
Yeah. But, we do have plenty of friends who've accepted our education, if you will, plenty. And I don't hold it, by the way, I do not hold it against those two good friends, because they still lovingly visit him and what have you. It's just that I think they want to see him better. Well, I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah, I had that challenge with some friends who just couldn't go anymore. They couldn't see their lovely friend Patty.
It's hard.
In that position, even though before they were thick as thieves.
Steve, I'm very fortunate that they do still visit John, but and they do engage. So I guess I could say they are learning. What do you think?
You talked about not overdoing it with John, and I found that kind of interesting. What did you mean by not overdoing it?
Well, what happened is this. John, typically with his friends that I just mentioned, would have evenings where they would have dinner and maybe watch a movie and what have you, and have long fun together during the day. But what happened is it started to be where if John had more than like 2 hours of engagement, he would actually literally fall asleep in front of them, or worse than falling asleep, his cognitive level declined quickly. And so both John and my friends were glad when I would sometimes say, I think we're all a little tired here. And I did find that once he rested his brain, he kind of like recovered. This is a while back, okay? But overtiring John, that was not a good move at all. Not a good move at all. Because later on he would have something, the night would be difficult,
How difficult?
Difficult in the sense that, for example, maybe family had visited. If we had allowed it to go on as long as he was comfortable, if you will, later on he would have like delusions when the people left, like, why are 3 women still in our house? He would think I'm an imposter. That was very hard. That was very hard. So I learned that it was just as hard for me if John got too tired as it was for him.
That's it. That's really good advice. You're trying to do as much as you can or help your loved one do as much as they can. And yet you need to have kind of like a restrictor belt on that thing a little bit in terms of how you're going to manage that for both his sake and yours. Now, that's good advice. You mentioned getting ahead of sundowning. We haven't really done a lot on sundowning. Could you explain what you experienced with sundowning and how you got ahead of it?
Sure. Well, for our case, sundowning for John meant as the day progressed, and especially toward dinner time, not particularly when it was getting dark, but toward dinner time, I believe his brain got tired, frankly. I don't know. He'd been using so much energy to think and engage and converse and figure things out during the day. So toward dinner time, he lost a bit of that and would get little flare-ups and things like that. We called them flare-ups. He would get angry quickly, and this was not typical of John. And so by the term, we termed it together. We called it, because he knew it wasn't typical, and I did too. And the reason we called it flare-ups is because as soon as he'd get upset about something, it would pass quickly, and he might not even remember it. And then that was a little tricky because, of course, I did. And so what I did to help with the sundowning, and I had some advice about this, was to leave more lights on, things like that, keep the evening calm, things like that, because otherwise the rest of the evening was not pleasant for him. And I was trying to solve things, and I don't need to be solving every single thing that comes up, I found out.
So sundowning is a sense of what? A sense that the day is over and I'm ready to go to bed? What is sundowning?
I did not experience it like that at all with John. Sundowning, that would have been a comfortable way. Sundowning for John was like getting irritated about things that did not irritate before, and losing some sense, in my opinion, of watching him, like some sort of cognition, like why are these 3 ladies in here? Who are you? Occasionally he would have me bring out documents but this other lady has the same documents. I don't think that you're my wife, this kind of thing. So that was hard. So
Did he pace? Did he pace back and forth?
He didn't pace. He got lost more. In our own home, he would get lost more.
Oh.
Yes. And he would admit it. He would say, honey, I don't know where this is or that is. But he didn't pace. I have heard of people that pace. But he had an anxiety that was right under the surface.
You started to mention something. Sounds like John knew he had the disease, accepted he had the disease. Did that make it easier for you, do you think, than, of course, you haven't experienced any other situations, but we've talked to people who've dealt with people who never accepted the fact that they had some memory problems, and that made it even harder. How do you feel about that?
Well, the fact that you mention it reminds me, definitely from the very beginning, from the early diagnosis, John went to classes with me through the Alzheimer's associations and things like that. He went to a day center. He brought it up that he thought that would be beneficial, although I had already researched it, of course, but he brought it up. Yes, I'd say for a good 3 years, John actually knew. And of course, it was frustrating to him. He did know that he had Alzheimer's. It wasn't a pleasing thing, naturally, of course, but he fought it by going to the day center 3 days a week. And then we did have help in the home finally, so that I could go out and do something, so that I was a better advocate and care partner, This
might be a tough one, feeling alone.
Yeah. one gets used to it. What happened was because John, I'm talking about the last 4 years, okay? So I'd say year 3 and 4, John couldn't follow my conversation and I couldn't follow his. So this guy who had always had such great engaging ideas, he became less and less conversational, and that made me feel a little lonely in my own home. I think he was a little bit aware of it, and he tried, but what would happen is he would begin a conversation, and I'm listening, but I couldn't figure out which conversation he was in, like where did this start and where are we going? So I would just go literally with wherever he was going at one point, because that was hard. Yeah, I did feel lonely because I missed his engaging ideas. He had some really good ideas.
What did you do about it?
I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but I didn't usually eventually, I should say, bring up things. I stopped commenting too much, because I didn't want to frustrate him. And I knew it wasn't going to lead to any meaningful conversation. But what I did, Steve, this is a good question, is I think I just mentioned that I had some care partners in the home eventually so that I could go out and have conversations with friends and such. I'd go to lunch with a girlfriend, or I'd get my hair done or my nails done, and it just made me feel better. So when I came home, I was really glad. Also, when he went to the day center, I was really glad when I went to pick him up, because I do think that engaging situations, like, for example, outside in the day center, I think that he found it maybe more engaging, or he had to try more. I don't know. But when he came home, when I picked him up, I was happy to see him, and he had talked with people.
So the day center actually worked for both of you?
Yeah, very well.
Yeah.
For a while, yeah.
Maybe this is what you were talking about before, but you spoke about learning to accept the lack of active participation. Is that what you're talking about in terms of you're talking to John and he's just not following your train of thought, or is it something else?
It is something else. Conversation is one thing. Engagement and discussion is one thing. But actually, later in John's diagnosis, he lacked initiative. For example, before he was a car guy, he could no longer, or did no longer, want to do anything of that, which interested him before. Even during the pandemic, for example, we got him started on puzzles. He used to like that. No. Painting, no. And nothing but sitting in his chair. There was no initiation. And I would bring ideas to him, and even then and now, even though I bring him, it's very rare that he will go ahead and join.
Okay. So we kind of talked a little bit about that. Actually, Virginia referenced this. She never felt like she was any longer. She was the parent, and her mom was the daughter. But maybe you'd expand upon the whole idea of being a spouse. And I'm going to ask you a really difficult question, and you can say no if you don't. But you no longer felt like a spouse. What did that entail?
Well, that was the hardest thing. It still is, actually. John considers me, or for some reason, thinks I'm his sister. His sister and he had a very difficult early life with 4 stepmothers. John's birth mother left when he was about 18 months old, and right after the birth of the sister. And therefore, I guess maybe the older memories come back. I don't know. Fortunately, because I'm nice, he has a better relationship in his mind now with his sister than they ever did as an adult. So I love that. I've contributed to that. Although his sister is in a facility in San Francisco, and she's far more affected by Alzheimer's than John. But anyway, so I answer to whomever he calls now, and I just say, honey, I'm right here. What can I do for you, or how can I help? It really hurt the first 20 or so times. I don't know the number, but I was just like, when he thought I was an imposter or called me someone else, even though I knew, I had heard from my support groups, I'd heard about this. But I mean, I've been married to this wonderful guy for 50 years, and I just thought I not only deserved to have him know who I was, I just loved it when he did, Recently, when my boys were standing near me, he said, now you know your mother, and blah, blah, blah. So this was really kind of great. He didn't call me Dee, but it's just something that flashed in, and I like it. So they are my ID cards now. But yes, John and I were fortunate, blessed, however you want to put it, to know we had married our best friend. And therefore, for the first many, many times, I kind of couldn't believe that he actually did not know me. This was something I couldn't accept for a while. So I tried to help him and prove it. I had the same bracelet as he had, the same ring that he picked out, and things like that. Our wedding books, everything. But it's okay because, it's really not about me. It's really not about me.
I hope a lot of people hear you say that. It's really important to know that it's really not about you. And he's not doing anything to hurt you.
Oh, no. And I
Intentionally.
gathered that finally. Yes, yes. And therefore, for example, Steve, when I would put my hand on his hand or shoulder or want to hug him or something, because I'm his sister, he doesn't want that. And it's an imposition. So I want to do what's best for John, even though that's very hard for me. And so I don't go there.
That was the question I was going to ask you. I've never asked anybody, but I think you might be up for it. How was the change in terms of your relationship, the touching, the hugging, the loss of that for you?
Very hard, very hard. I love John so much, and I get to see him a lot now, but still, I just said it's not about me, and so I can adjust. We're talking about adjustments. I can adjust. John cannot adjust. Once, when he needed help, this is going to be a little private, but in the shower, he needed some help, and I went in, and because I'm his sister, he was very upset. Even yelled, "Get out of here," because, his sister, he was like, "Get out of here." And of course that hurt. But you know what? If you put it in the framework of what they're experiencing, I know that I can handle it. I feel equipped to handle this. I mentioned to you that earlier in his lifetime, John had 8 sessions of ECT, electric shock therapy. That was pretty hard. You go through life and you keep thinking, like right now I'm thinking, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the hardest thing I've ever done because it's now. But that was pretty darn hard, okay? That was hard for me to watch your husband 8 times have to have this.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm saying I'm equipped. Thank God I am equipped. And I know I'm going to be equipped. I'm going to do it. And I'm just going with it.
I think that's really important. I'll never forget my close friend, Michael Todd. Whenever I would get really down, he would start talking about all the things that I had done and how I had become different and better, and pump me up, if you would, about, hey, you've done a lot and you are doing a lot. And I think sometimes we forget as caregivers, it's easy to kind of just be in the moment, which is good, but forget what you've been through and what you've accomplished to get there.
Well, my life group members do, my very best friend, prayer partner for about 12 years, I think now, they remind me. And I know I'm equipped. I'm going to be there.
John is in a community right now.
He is. He was placed in July due to a wandering event at 4:00 in the morning, which had never happened before. And although I had been warned and I had the door alarmed and locked doubly, whatever was in his mind enabled him to open the door, and the alarm awakened me. A police drone found him. He had been injured. He broke his nose and scraped up a whole lot of things. It could have been far worse. He could have, since he didn't know what our house was, he could have gone to someone's house and knocked on the door or not. So even that I feel is a little providential. So I had been looking for a place to place John either in September or December. And my best friend and I had gone to visit places, and I had asked God, I said, you know what? I know I need to place him. He had had one much more dangerous thing before. He had opened the car door on the freeway. Therefore, I was looking. But the hospital, when he was taken over there, they said, he really shouldn't come home. And so I providentially found this place. And yes, he's in a place, a very safe place.
How challenging is that for you to visit him there?
Visiting him there is not challenging. Having him not at home is very challenging. It has presented a profound sadness for me occasionally, especially around the times when I typically would give him medications and things like that. They're extremely good relationship at this place from caregivers to residents, and it comforts me that 3 or 4 people are doing what I was doing. He's very safe. I know I would not be equipped, if we're talking about it, equipped at home to do it right now.
How's that?
My husband got out at 4 o'clock in the morning in a place that I had already secured, and he got hurt, and I'm trying to unsee that sight. So yeah, I'm very fortunate in that regard. I found a good, safe place. I had a placement specialist help me that day. I had just the day before been visiting a place, but this placement specialist actually knew beds that were open. Therefore, I found this place.
How far did he get down the street before he fell?
I don't know how far he got before he fell. I know that when the alarm got on, I raced out, and I called the police, of course, and they came and were helping me look like, do you have a pool? Is he at the neighbor's house, etc. But meanwhile, a police drone found him and they brought him home.
Well, you talked a little bit about safety, and maybe you've covered that, but it sounds like that's been a focus of your relationship with John from the very beginning. How can I keep him safe? And even the decision to place him in a community was based on safety.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I love the guy. I'm going to keep him. And yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm trusting the experts' knowledge, actually. We have a lot of expertise here in Orange County, and so I'm trusting them.
Okay, Dee, one last question.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing?
Thank you for asking. That's a hard one. Yeah, I'm actually doing better now after, what has it been, since July? It's about 3 months. I do have a lot of support. Like I mentioned, I have what I call a life group. It's a small group from our church. They help me so much. I'm actually sleeping much better, Steve. I was very vigilant when John was home. I'm sleeping better. I'm actually eating better because I used to treat him to some treats. He's actually eating better because they feed him such healthy things. So he has a strong constitution. He does have a few concomitant things like the congestive heart failure and the kidney stage 4 disease, which could compromise his health. But as far as I go, I'm a very healthy person. I'm trying to do what I've been told, which is take care of myself. Get out and do things, and don't stay as like I feel like I don't want to see people because I'll probably be crying once in a while or something like that. So I just do it. My best friend said, when somebody invites you to do it, you say yes.
Well, we don't have to end there, but is there any other piece of advice you would offer that you think is like, that other caregivers who are listening to this would love to hear?
Perhaps what I did early on, I wrote some affirmations for myself. They really helped me. When I look back over them, they encouraged me. They're my thoughts. They're not anything special. They're just like, okay, you're equipped for this. Just kind of like you mentioned, you've done this, you've done that, you've done this, you've learned that. So if they could write their own affirmations, they don't have to be a lot, and then read over them sometimes.
Did you pin them up on the refrigerator?
No, I have them right here. I have them in a booklet, and I've shared them, by the way, with a lot of people, and they have blessed them. They have.
Well, would you mind sharing them now?
Well, of course, I can read some. I mean, sure. They're very encouraging to me. They have to do with the fact that I am equipped. Oh, here's one. The first one says, I am equipped in many ways for this precious journey through many life experiences I've had. When I feel ill-equipped, let me be reminded that I can exercise my specific gifts and strengths in these new areas of life's challenges. I may even develop new strengths and areas of resilience, which will be instrumental in my eventual success in caregiving. I said that because I formerly had been pretty successful in my life challenges, just in general, my career, raising the kids and all that. And this one met me full on, and I didn't feel that successful at first, Just another one is let me recognize for those times that I am successful in helping my loved one feel calm and content, even when he can't understand what's happening, actual or imagined. It feels very good to help my loved one I said that because it's not just specific to my husband. I hope it'll encourage someone else. To be content with whatever situation he's dealing with, even if it can feel hurtful to me at the time. I can adapt to the situation most times. Situations change with Alzheimer's. What seems a really difficult situation at one time may disappear pretty soon.
That's a good place to end.
All right. Yeah, so if they do their own, it would be encouraging.
Yeah, that's good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you.
Well, it's obvious to me that you're amazing.
She's got a handle on this.
Yeah, we've all been on this journey, and you find and see people who are not handling it, and that's okay. It's not easy. You're doing a great job, Dee.
Thank you.
You are doing a great job, and
it's my pleasure, really.
It's great to have you and have you tell your story, and especially since it's real. You're right there, right now. Mm-hmm. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Spotlight on Care is produced by the University of California, Irvine Institute on Memory Impairments and Neurological Disorders, UCI Mind. Interviews focus on personal caregiving journeys and may not represent the views of UCI Mind. Individuals concerned about cognitive disorders, prevention, or treatment should seek expert diagnosis and care. Please subscribe to the Spotlight on Care podcast wherever you listen. For more information, visit mind.uci.edu.